ایسٹ انڈیا کمپنی کے فرزندوں سے to the sons of the East India Company. کس زبان سے کہہ رہے ہو آج اے سوداگروں؟ دھار میں انسانیت کے نام کو اونچا کرو. جس کو سب کہتے ہیں ہٹلر بھیدیا ہے، بھیدیا. بھیدیا کو مار دو گولی، پائے امن و بقا. باغ انسانی پہ چلنے ہی کو ہے بد خزاں، باد خزاں. آدمیت لے رہی ہے ہچکیوں پر ہچکیاں. ہاتھ ہٹلر کا ہے رخش خودسری کی باغ پر. تیغ کا پانی چھدک دو جرمنی کے آگ پر. سخت حیران ہوں کہ محفل میں تمہاری اور یہ ذکر نوع انسانی کی مستقبل کے اب کرتے ہو فکر. جب یہاں آئے تھے تم سوداگری کے واسطے، نوع انسانی کے مستقبل سے کیا واقف نہ تھے. ہندیوں کے جسم میں کیا روح آزادی نہ تھی. سچ بتاؤ کیا وہ انسانوں کی آبادی نہ تھی. اپنے ظلم میں بے نہایت کا فسانہ یاد ہے. کمپنی کا بھی وہ دور مجرمانہ یاد ہے. لوٹتے پھرتے تھے تم جب کارواں در کارواں. سر بڑھانا پھر رہی تھی دولت ہندوستان. دستکاروں کے انگوٹھے کٹ کے پھرتے تھے تم. سرد لاشوں سے گھروں کو پاٹ کے پھرتے تھے تم. صنعت ہندوستان پر موت تھی چھائی ہوئی. موت بھی کیسی، تم ہمارے ہاتھ کی لائی ہوئی. اللہ اللہ کس قدر انصاف کی طالب ہو آج. میر جعفر کی قسم کیا دشمن حق تھا سراج. وہ آواز کے بیگموں کا بھی ستانہ یاد ہے. یاد ہے جھانسی کی رانی کا زمانہ یاد ہے. ہجرت سلطان دلی کا سمن بھی یاد ہے. شیر دل ٹیپو کی خونی داستان بھی یاد ہے. تیسرے فاقے میں ایک گرتے ہوئے کو تھامنے کن کے سر لائے تھے تم شاہ ظفر کے سامنے. وہ بھگت سنگھ جس کے غم میں اب بھی دل ناشاد ہے، اس کی گردن میں جو ڈالا تھا وہ پھاندا یاد ہے. ذہن میں ہوگا یہ تازہ ہندیوں کا داغ بھی. یاد تو ہوگا تمہیں جلین والا باغ بھی. So, now for the translation. With what tongue dare you counsel us, O traitors? You say restore the dignity of humanity in the world. He who they call Hitler is but a wolf. Let us shoot him down in the name of peace and stability. The winds of bleak autumn are about to ruin the garden. Humanity is gasping in its death throes. Hitler's hand has grasped the mane of the horse of hubris. Let us douse Germany's fire with the water of the sword. I am amazed by the words that emerge from your assembly. You talk about the future of humanity now? When you came here to ply your sorry trade, were you not acquainted with humanity's future then? Didn't the bodies of Indians have the soul of freedom? Speak truthfully. Wasn't it a community of humans? Do you even remember the tales of your unparalleled cruelty, of the company's criminal days in power when you went about looting every caravan while the wealth of India wandered bareheaded? You who used to cut off the thumbs of weavers, and fill holes in the earth with cold corpses. The industry of India was under the shadow of death, and what a wretched death at your hands. Allah, Allah. How you demand justice today. Swear by Mir Jafar, was Siraj such an enemy of truth? Do you recall how you harassed the noble women of Oud? Remember the age of the Queen of Jhansi? Remember? Do you remember the flight of the King of Delhi? Remember the bloody legend of Tipu the Lion-Hearted? And to support him as he was collapsing on his third hungry day, whose heads did you bring in front of King Zafar? That Bhagat Singh, whose memory still fills the heart with sorrow. Surely you remember the noose you put around his neck. The scars that Indians felt must be fresh in your memory. Those that were inflicted at Jallianwala Bagh. You remember, don't you? Hi, I'm Sascha Akhtar, poet and fiction writer, translator. I have been doing work in the UK community with the promotion of the Urdu language. Through the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to team up with the Stephen Spender Trust. If you're not familiar, look them up. They've been doing translation prizes for a very long time. And the last few years was the first time they'd done an Urdu Spotlight Prize, which was this tremendous opportunity to seek out young people in the community who may have, these memories of Urdu poetry, which I found in the process would be passed down, not through a book or through a physical archive, but through the memory, so the archive of memory, which, as many people now understand, is actually the hugest archive, the memory of immigrants and the memories of our elders. So through this project, there was a lot of wonderful work that came out, and there was some beautiful stories about poems passed down through people's grandmothers. And, what I've often talked about is how the process of migration, sort of the struggle, it is not conducive to things like, teaching your children the language of your ancestors, or, making sure that they know the language or have that sort of tool, because let's face it, for a lot of Desi immigrants, they would get, or they get to the UK, and they have to find their feet in order to give their children this better life that all migrants imagine. Now, the Urdu progressive movement is very important. You see, Urdu poetry for a very long time had a tradition of an engagement with the human condition, but the period of 1920s onwards saw a new mood, one that Jan Nisar Akhtar called Awami Bedari ki Leher. Bedari is restlessness, Awami is people. The awakening of the masses is one translation of it. And there were plenty of standard patriotic pieces, but a large number of poems indicated the beginning of a new form of social and political awakening. And the interesting thing about this consciousness is that the poems of this time, such as The Farmer by Josh, The Rise of the New Sun by Hamidullah, The Cry of the New Times by Sarosh Kashmiri, Challenge of Life by Firaq Gorakhpuri, The Laborer's Flute by Jamil Manzari, Revolution by Israr al-Haq Majaz, The Farmer's Song by Masood Akhtar Jamal, actively sought to reframe the anti-colonial struggle, along with the binaries of the exploiters and the exploited, the zamindars and the landless farmers, and the sarmayadars and the mazdoors, the capitalists and the laborers. I published a book of fiction called Of Necessity and Wanting, which is this one, which I do believe some of you have read. So I'm going to read a scene from the book, which takes place on August 14th. And I think that this will be a good way for us to contemplate so many issues on this day, August 14th, 2022. 75 years since, you know, the subcontinent was split into so many pieces. August 14th, Independence Day, arrived smack dab in the middle of the wet season. Every year, the armed forces had a special event that was televised all over the country. People clustered around their television sets to see the air display, the marching and the shooting. Flags usually started appearing a few weeks before. Some made of cloth, usually the large ones, would appear in the markets for sale. Others made of paper constructed into bunting. Of hundreds of different colored flags would adorn the outsides of houses and shops. Javed loved this time of the year. Everyone on the street seemed full of goodwill and camaraderie. He and his friends met in the morning to eat hot halwa puri and fragrant cholas, and then go on a drive, waving flags and yelling, Pakistan Zindabad. Long live Pakistan, like all the other male motorcycle crews did on August 14th. Suzuki vans with people hanging out the back and off the sides drove shrieking and yelling joyfully by. Luckily, the rain had temporarily abated for a few days in advance, so some roads had recovered, allowing more freedom of movement. Others, however, had just become pools of stagnant water, trapping anyone who attempted to drive through them. They drove down the ideal bakery road in an attempt to get to Seaview, but found themselves adrift with other marooned souls. People had altogether abandoned the enterprise and were sitting idly on the strip of grass embedded in concrete that divided the two-way traffic. Some wore Pakistan flag pins, some waved flags. The air of revelry and celebration was palpable. A little further up, some guys were making joints in the middle of the road, in the middle of the day, in the midst of the chaos of the monsoon floods. Javed and his friends decided to join them. As Javed sat stoned in the middle of Clifton, watching the traffic trying to get by, he noticed a curious thing. None of the expensive cars carrying their dare cargo of elite Karachi was sporting any emblems of patriotism. The expressions of the people in the cars were sour and dissatisfied. It was the drivers of these cars who, finding themselves stuck in a pothole, yelled and fulminated at people trying to help them, whilst their employers sat put in their Honda Civics, staring out of the window as random passers-by tried to haul their seated asses along the road. Javed started giggling at that. Anjum looked over at him. Kya hua? What up? Bas yaar, ye nazara hai aam. Oh, nothing, just the spectacle of people. Yeah, it's a fish market, Anjum agreed, laughing. They seemed to have sat there for hours, getting steadily more red-eyed. They sang songs. Soon some other guys also began to sing. Pakistan ka matlab kya? La ilaha illallah. What is the meaning of Pakistan? There is no God but Allah. This was the cue for Javed and his friends to move on. They were Allah-loving Muslims like the next man, but these days, this type of out-and-out religiosity was something they stayed clear of. You never knew where the next fundu was going to spring from with a bomb strapped to his person. They managed to continue their travels towards their sacred place in the midst of Karachi, in the madness, the beach. At one point, Harris's motorbike got too much water in its exhaust. It started choking and sputtering, so they waited for it to dry off at a koka by the side of the road, sitting on rickety chairs, drinking thumbs up and smoking cigarettes. The proprietor of the koka was an elderly man who they referred to as simply Chacha. Have you guys noticed, started Javed, how today it is the poorest who are sitting on the street celebrating? It's us who are the most excited. Kya bakwas kar raha hai yaar, Mr. Philosopher? What are you on about, Mr. Philosopher? Replied Anjum lightly. Look around, yaar. All the big cars have no flags. There are definitely no begums, aunties hanging out the windows yelling Pakistan Zindabad. The image made them laugh. Yeah, I guess you're right, agreed Anjum. Yehi to hai hal. This is the state of things, my friend. You're right. When I overhear people in the markets or at work, it's always the guy with the biggest house, the largest car, or the auntie with the most gold dripping off her who will start complaining about ye mulk to barbad ho gaya, this country, this country is destroyed, this and that. These people are crazy, Javed exclaimed passionately. Those who have the biggest problems because of the inefficiency of the country, bijli, pani, electricity, water, they have the most passion in their hearts for the country, Rashid proceeded. And Haris, in a falsetto voice, mimicking or mocking a begum, said, Oh my God, I am so sick and tired of filling petrol in my generator. I tell you, darling. An uproar of laughter followed. I think, said Javed, starting to stand up on his chair unsteadily under the effect of the multiple joints they had smoked. There should be a law. The more air conditioners and generators you have, the less right you have to complain. They laughed. Yeah, and sunglasses, designer sunglasses and pajeros and mobile phones, chimed in Rashid Haris and Anjum, aping a trendy, talking fashionably into his fashionable phone, running his fingers through his hair, shoulders, and chest all puffed up. They all lifted their bottles of thumbs up, cheering in unison. Pakistan Zindabad. Partition-wise, 75 years. What are we talking about? 75 years of what is my question. What I like to think, sitting today, 2022, and what we've been seeing in cultural and societal surges of movements, and what I like to think about, or what gives me hope, is this wave of resistance and people beginning to find their voices, especially the female, from Pakistan, from India, migrants who have grown up with families that unfortunately do suppress them. I mean, there's been a whole surge of this stuff. There's, I think it's Sheena Patel on Rough Trade Books, who's written this wild novel. Then there's this female punk band called the Sex Patels, which arose out of frustration and a real desire to address the acts of injustice that many of us are really shocked by when it comes to government, and that is a huge thing. We had Lady Parts, which came out on the BBC, which of course, these type of things are controversial, but I mean, what a time it is. So 75 years of what I see as desis, and I like the word desi. I think desi is a unifying word because let's face it, people like to talk about India, about Hindi, and all the Indian and Pakistani languages, of course, Bangladesh, Kashmir, we have to. But Desi, I find a unifying word. So to me, what it is it's been 75 years of all these people split asunder. And I don't mean within the land geography. I mean wandering the lands, wandering the world, trying to find our place in it, trying to find a home. Somehow all coming back together through culture. So that's what I'm celebrating, is that the spirit of Desis, and in particular being a radical feminist, I would say celebrating that, no? Over 2020 and 21, I started making a list of all the South Asians who'd been published in the UK. And it was in the hundreds and hundreds. And it's all very well for us to complain, because we have to. It's not complaint, it's resistance, right? But it's through that the change actually is happening. We talk about, South Asians aren't represented, but we are being represented. Let me tell you, in the UK particularly, I'm not talking about the US, it's a different scene there. But in the UK, I mean, I was just overjoyed when I wanted to make this list so I could gauge the spectrum. I'm engaged in the literary community, in the cultural community. It's good to know what's going on, right? If anybody wants to read contemporary Desi fiction, you need to just find it. It's all there. And it's what I like to say is the Desis are coming. They are. We're coming. We've arrived. I believe that it's all going down as we speak, frankly. And it's in every sort of area. I mean, even the success of, let's say, Satnam Sanghera with his book was fantastic, and there are other allies. If you look at the academic Corinne Fowler, who wrote Green Unpleasant Land, I mean, her campaign with the National Trust, the anti-colonial project, it's fantastic. And yes, we all get targeted. Look at Priyamvada Gopal, the Cambridge professor of post-colonial studies. She's fantastic. She's been targeted. Corinne has been targeted, which is to say that it will always be a struggle, and it will be a fight, but look at what is going on. Even South Asian Heritage Month in itself, right? I mean, this is a good thing. It's important to recognize when there are good things going on, right? So that poem was banned right after it was written. Just to refresh, it was Josh Malihabadi, East India Company ke Farzandoñ Se. What I feel going forward is that we continue to uncover our literary heritage in all the languages, Punjabi, Gujarati, I feel like with these small efforts, like even this video, even what I do, we continue to uncover all of this. So this poem I shared with you is such a powerful thing, and it reminds us that we had voices. And when you read this work in Urdu, in Hindi, I am so moved by the passion and power, and it's something that I wish I had growing up. I wish that the revolutionary writings were available to me as a Pakistani child. It wasn't available to me. It's after my seeking that I've arrived at these places. First, we had to try to heal, and we are still healing. Everything is a continuum. Then slowly we're trying to find our parts, and that is a continuum. We're still finding our parts. But in order to arrive at any kind of a wholeness, we have to collect and keep collecting and finding. So my advice would be find these things, these banned poems, these banned books. Angare, another seminal work of short stories and plays, 9 stories and a play. It was banned. It's been translated from Urdu now. But my advice also, if you're interested in Urdu learning, is do what I did, which is, yes, I did have a background in Urdu, but I just set it up as a task. So like my desire to know what they were what the Urdu writers are talking about was so great that I just would sit down with like I really recommend Rekta is phenomenal. So how is Urdu going to die when we've got Rekta, you know, who are going from strength to strength? Like you can literally click on a word in a poem on the website and it will tell you the meaning. You know, sit down with those poems, find a poem that's whose translation stirs you and decide to make your own, you know, because every translation is important, especially when it comes from ourselves and our own heritage. What you're going to put into it is going to be totally different. So thank you, South Asian Heritage Month, for this opportunity. And, you know, it's just so cool to see what all the Desis are doing. Let's connect. Let's keep connecting. Let's keep talking. I'm on Instagram, Sascha, Sascha Akhtar, Akhtar. I've been doing this for 20 years in the, writing poetry. I have 6 collections of poetry. They're all in English. My next book is going to be very exciting. It's also part of my desire to dig up our literary heritage and share it with ourselves. It's going to be a translation of a rare book from 1936 by female author Hijab Imtiaz, who sadly us Desis have not, you know, been privy to her greatness. But here's a little contribution. It will be out maybe November or October on Oxford University Press, India. But, you know, watch the space. On Twitter, I do a lot more sort of talking, as we all do. So you can keep an eye there. It's at Akhtar Sascha. If you haven't read this book and you have a desire to, it's still out there. And it's a pleasure to have it out there. And it's a pleasure. All the South Asian book bloggers have been so cool, so inviting. It's been real. So keep it real, Desis, and thank you so much for having me. I hope this has been of some help, and I look forward to reading many more translations from all our languages. Bahari is so important as well. It's Sascha Akhtar saying bye and happy independence, eh? Or happy coming back together.